In the early 1900s, America's hopeful future and greatness as a nation was not without its growing pains. The successes were accompanied by social ills such as orphan trains and baby farming, which hit an all-time high. The concerns for this problem did not go unnoticed, and the Florida Annual Conference resolved to take steps to establish an orphan's home. In 1908, the Florida Methodist Orphanage was established with the purchase of one building, 8 town lots, and a tract of 40 acres of land purchased for $1,250 in Enterprise, Florida. The Articles of Incorporation were filed with the state of Florida on June 3, 1908. Mrs. H.G. Brooks was hired as the first matron of the home. One of the most famous hotels in the state of Florida, the Brock House, hosted great Americans like President Ulysses S. Grant, President Grover Cleveland, General William Sherman, Samuel Frederick DeBarry, and members of the Vanderbilt family. This spacious building was graciously donated to the Methodist Orphanage by Mr. and Mrs. Phillips of New York in 1935. The Florida Conference of the Methodist Episcopal Church South dedicated the home by declaring, "Here we propose, by the help of God and the cooperation of all good people, to found a noble Christian institution for the relief, education, and training of destitute, fatherless, and motherless children who may look to us for help." For 100 years, this has been the guiding principle of the Children's Home. The early years of the Children's Home were difficult as the church sought to build a solid foundation to care for Florida's children. The Children's Home recorded a significant milestone with a record 0 number of deaths during the worldwide flu pandemic of 1918. In 1919, electricity was installed at the home and assisted in washing and ironing chores. In 1920, the home canned over 6,000 quarts of fruits and vegetables. And during the Great Depression of the 1930s, the Children's Home grew much of its own food, tended dairy cattle, and raised a variety of other animals. 150 quarts of milk was produced each day, giving each child a quart of milk. In 1926, the home printed its first newsletters and conference materials. The boys and girls learned the techniques of the print trade until the print shop was closed. At the height of the Depression, more than 250,000 teenagers became drifters, riding the rails and seeking whatever work they could find, taking refuge in shelters cobbled together from salvaged wood, cardboard, and tin. The Fifth Sunday offering and many individual gifts led to the expansion of land purchases and new buildings to address this growing problem. During the 1930s, as many as 140 children would be in her care at a given time, but to avoid financial crises, children were turned away and salaries cut. In 1939, the Florida Methodist Orphanage's name was changed to the Florida Methodist Children's Home. This change reflected the reality that an increasing number of children coming into care were not simply orphans, but victims of abuse, abandonment, and family collapse. Additionally, as many as 100 former residents of the Children's Home served in World War II. Many were killed or listed as missing in action. And in 1945, 5 girls attended college. In 1952, 2 of the home's boys received preacher licenses, and many of the home's children were baptized into the Christian faith. During the 1940s and 50s, viewpoints in childcare began to change. Children needed much more than 3 meals a day and a safe place to sleep. The emotional and psychological needs of children required a higher level of clinical care and attention. Instead of housing the boys and girls in dormitories, 2 new cottages were built in 1955, providing a home-like atmosphere for each child. In 1970, adoption reached its peak of over 175,000 placements in 1 year. In 1971, the Florida Methodist Children's Home merged with the Sarah Hunt Methodist Children's Home in Daytona Beach, Florida, and was renamed the Florida United Methodist Children's Home. This change signaled the merger of the Methodist Church and the Evangelical United Brethren Church into the United Methodist Church. The Children's Home continued to expand during the 70s and 80s. Our gymnatorium was built in 1976, followed by our campus chapel in 1979. In 1982, the Children's Home opened the doors of our Inasmuch Child Care Center as an outreach into the community for working families, and the Therapeutic Ropes course was added in 1989. A tremendous period of growth began in 1998 with the addition of the Bruton Counseling Center, Waller Jeter Cottage, the renovation of the Worrell Education Center, and the renovation of Hardin Hall, the largest building on campus. The Florida United Methodist Children's Home is now a diverse ministry that includes residential care, therapeutic group care, foster care, adoption services, emergency shelter care, independent living assistance, and a community child care center. Although the United States has achieved great wealth and prosperity, social problems still exist. Things have not changed for children in America. The work of the Florida United Methodist Children's Home is needed now as much as it was 100 years ago. Throughout its long and valued history, the Florida United Methodist Children's Home has been a haven of peace and a merciful blessing to all that have come into her care. Thank you for joining with us as we celebrate a century of care for God's children.